All right, so we are on lecture 6 of our journey through beginning Greek. And if you remember from last time, we are actually continuing our chapter number 4. And I mentioned to you that this is perhaps the most important um, lesson in beginning Greek. It's foundational to the way we understand the language. And the reason is that verbs are perhaps the most important part of speech in Greek. Everything seems to be centered on how verbs work, and it's important that we understand how they function. Okay, there's some background noise. Okay. All right. So let's get started here. I'm just going to grab my pen very quickly. I'm trying to remember where it is. It's usually here. Just give me one moment, please. Okay, so it looks like I lost one of the pens. I don't know where it is, but we can do with this. All right, overview of verbs. We saw last week that in English, verbs are somewhat limited. They only communicate the action, and that we need more helping words in English to communicate what is happening. Whereas in Greek, one verb is able to communicate the person, whether it's first person, second person, or third person, and also number, whether it's singular or plural. And all of this was covered last week. You can always go back and review. I'm just quickly running through. Once we reach slide 19 is where we pick up. So the first aspect in verbs that we need to understand is Greek verbs capture and communicate person. Person refers to the subject of the verbal idea. Is it in first person? Is it in second person? Or is it in third person? And these are again categorized as singular or plural. So first person singular would be I, and first person plural would be we. Second person singular would be you in the singular, and second person plural would be something like y'all or you all in the plural. And third person singular will be he, she, or it, masculine, feminine, or neuter. And third person singular would be they. So in the first person, the subject is the one speaking. In the second person, the subject is the one being spoken to. For example, you are losing. So it's almost like the narrator speaking to the subject. And in the third person, the subject is being spoken about. He is losing, where the subject is being spoken about. Greek verbs also contain and communicate number. Number refers to how many things are relating to the action of the verb. And again, there's first person, second person, third person. The number of the verb is always connected to the person. And this needs to be in our mind imprinted. The moment we say second person plural, we should immediately know it's you, plural, where the subject is being spoken to. Whenever we say third person singular, we need to say he, she, it, where the subject is being spoken about. Greek verbs and even English verbs have the idea of voice. Voice indicates the way the subject relates to the action or state expressed by the verb. Active voice, the subject performs the action. Middle voice, the subject both performs and is affected by. This is the most important term, right? We've dwelt on it. Subject affectedness. In middle voice, the subject both performs the action and is affected by the action. And passive voice, the subject is the one receiving the action. In active voice, there are transitive verbs and intransitive verbs. Transitive verbs take a direct object. I see, but what do you see? They necessarily need a direct object. Intransitive verbs don't take a direct object. I'm walking, right? You can say this, you can complete the sentence without a need for a direct object. Those sort of verbs are called intransitive verbs. So here, egapesen, hatheos, ton kosmon. Hatheos, nominative masculine singular. God, ton kosmon, accusative masculine singular. The world. And the verb here is agapesan. You may recognize this. It looks very close to agape. Agape, agapesan. God loved the world. Here, this is a transitive verb because it's taking the object. And this is also in the active voice because the subject, nominative case, hatheos. The subject is the one doing the action, loving the world. God loved the world. Middle voice, subject affectedness. The subject both performs the action and is affected by the action. So some ways by which the subject gets affected is one way is reflexivity, where the subject performs the action upon himself. For example, you can see, I see myself, right? This is called reflexivity, where the subject is performing the action upon themselves. So this could be one way by which the middle voice can be rendered in English. Another way is by special interest. Subject may have some special interest in the action or benefit from the action. I see for myself, I cook for myself, I dress for myself. So this is another way by which you could render the middle voice to communicate subject affectedness, special interest. If you're not tracking with both reflexivity and special interest, don't dwell on it too much. And just remember the idea subject affectedness. That is what is the main idea of middle voice. Passive voice, the subject receives the action. Oh, they have some audio. They have some audio here too. In Greek, therapeuē, like therapy, tein gunaika. So this is what? Accusative feminine singular. And here's the verb therapeuē. He is healing. Why? Because this ending is communicating third person singular. He, she, it, right? Third person singular. So he is healing. Therapeuē contains that. Tein gunaika, the woman. This is in the active voice. So see how the stem is still therapeu, and now this ending is going to change, and that ending will show us that it is in the passive voice. Let's see how it would look like in the passive voice. He gune, what is this? Nominative, feminine singular. Nominative, feminine singular. He gune. The woman, therapeu, same stem, therapeu, etai. Now the ending is communicating to us that this is in the passive voice, meaning the woman, the subject, is now receiving the action. So see how we render it in English. The woman, Hegune, is being healed. The woman is not healing, but is being healed. Had this just been, for example, Hegune Therapeuae, like here, then it would have been the woman is healing, right? The woman is healing. And then we need an object to complete it, but at least it would say the woman is healing. Passive voice. What is this? Let's see the note there. We don't know who is the agent, who the agent of the action is. The agent can be added to a passive verb by using hupo plus genitive. So Hegune therapeuetai, the woman is being healed. By whom? You can say hupo tu kurio. By, hupo is a preposition by, tu kurio, by the Lord. Remember, I told you in prepositions, we did this during our office hours. Preposition, this is a prepositional phrase. Whenever a preposition has a noun attached to it, you ignore the case. You don't say is being healed by of the Lord, right? This functions as a prepositional phrase. And when we look at prepositions, we'll see that better. Okay, then we also looked at mood. There are 4 moods in New Testament Greek: indicative mood, subjunctive mood, optative mood, imperative mood. Indicative mood represents something as certain or asserted from the point of the narrator. So from the point of the narrator, something is being certain or asserted. So they're talking about something real. He went fishing. Will he go fishing? All of these are in the indicative mood because the narrator is saying something is happening. Subjunctive mood. It represents something as probable or contingent or indefinite. This is the important thing. Subjunctive mood communicates indefiniteness. So something is not definitely happening. He might go fishing whenever he goes fishing. So whenever you see the subjunctive mood, by the way, I don't have your videos on. I minimized it on the screen, so I don't know if someone has a question or is raising your hand. So I'd suggest maybe you can use the Zoom raise hand so I can see if there's anything you want to ask. So subjunctive mood is about indefiniteness. And whenever we see a verb in the subjunctive mood, we have to somehow communicate that indefiniteness. Next mood, optative mood, represents something as possible or hoped for. For example, I wish or I hope he would go fishing. That would be the optative mood. And finally, the imperative mood, something which is requested or commanded. Go fishing, please go fishing. That is in the imperative mood. These 3 are the most common moods. I'm sorry, I did that wrong. The first one, second one, and fourth one are the most common moods. This is not as common. Okay, now this brings us to probably the most important thing that we should talk about when it comes to verbs. The idea of tense and aspect. And when we think of English tense, we usually think about time. We immediately say a verb can be in the present tense, meaning it's happening right now. For example, I am eating. And then we think of the past tense, I ate, or I was eating, something like that, past time. And then we think of the future tense in English. And that's about future time. I will eat, right? That's how we think about tense in English. And for a long time in New Testament studies, in New Testament Greek studies, the 6 tense forms also were thought about in this way, time, that these 6 tense forms in Greek are somehow communicating time element. But recently, in the last, about 40, 50 years, there's been a lot of research and thinking and publications about another way of thinking about these tense forms, where time is a secondary thing. It's not the primary thing. And aspect is now the primary thing that tense forms communicate. And so this will be a different way for you to think about tense. And so please pay particular attention to what we are talking about. Do not try to force fit these 6 tense forms into time the way we do it in English. That won't work. And that's not how we are currently understanding the way Greek does tense forms. So please follow along with particular attention. There are 6 tense forms. And when we say forms, right, we are talking about the way they appear, right? Remember therapeuē, right? That's the ending. That's a form now. Stem plus the ending is a form. The way you see the verb, there are 6 tense forms. So we don't say there are 6 tenses. There are 6 tense forms. The way the word appears. The first tense form is present. This is its form. Now, in the present, it can change. There are many other ways, but this is one of its forms in the present. Luo. What is it communicating? I am losing, or I lose. Present tense form is communicating some aspect, okay? It's not primarily communicating time. No, it's primarily communicating aspect. I'm losing or I lose. Imperfect tense form, eluon, is communicating I was losing. You may immediately say here there is was. Isn't this showing past time? Yes, it is, but that's a secondary thing. The primary thing is what it's communicating here, the aspect. And what that aspect is, what are the 3 aspects, we'll talk about in a second. Future tense form communicates the aspect, I will lose. Again, you may say there is will here. Isn't this future time? Yeah, it's future time, but that's not the main thing it's communicating. Luso is communicating the fact that I will lose. Sorry. Aorist tense form, elusa. So both imperfect and aorist has this little augment here, epsilon. Elusa is communicating I loosed. Perfect tense form, leluka, communicates I have loosed. And a very rare tense form, you don't see this much. The first 5 are much more common. This is a rare tense form, pluperfect. Elelukain, I had loosed. Right? So now comes the big question. What is this aspect that the tense forms are communicating? Aspect is the subjective perspective or viewpoint from which an author or narrator communicates the action of the verb. So, for example, Let me draw a little eye here. The eye is looking at a action, whatever that action is, right? And this is very subjective. The author may look at it, one author may look at it one way, another narrator may look at the action another way, right? And what action? Let's just say, for example, the action is eating. Aspect is the subjective perspective, meaning it's from the viewpoint of this narrator. So let's just, for the example, let's say we are reading the book of Mark, where Mark is now the author. So from the subjective viewpoint of the narrator, how is he looking at this action of eating? And much more than that, how is he communicating now when he's writing the words in the book of Mark? Right? Draw a little book here. When he's writing about this action from his viewpoint, how is he communicating that action? And it seems like, this is what the scholarship is saying at this point, it seems like there are three ways, primarily, three ways by which the narrator, the author, communicates the action that is taking place. Three ways. First way is what is called imperfective aspect. Now, this is little confusing because we already saw in the 6 tense forms, there is one tense form which is called imperfect. That imperfect is a tense form. Okay, imperfect is a tense form. Imperfective is an aspect. It's the subjective viewpoint of the narrator. And 2 tense forms. This actually should be tense form. 2 tense forms out of the 6. 2 tense forms communicate this imperfective aspect. The first tense form which communicates imperfective aspect is present. Second tense form which communicates imperfective aspect is the imperfect tense form. Again, just for our reference, let's just write down here the 6 tense forms. One is present tense form, imperfect tense form, aorist tense form, perfect tense form, future tense form, pluperfect tense form. 6 tense forms. These 2 tense forms, present and imperfect, communicates an imperfective aspect. What does that mean? Means that the author now depicts or communicates the action as ongoing or in process. Another word you can think about is unfolding, without attention to the action's beginning or ending. So in the imperfect tense form, the narrator is looking at the action as unfolding, ongoing. He's saying eating is going on. He is eating. No mention of when did he begin eating, when will he end in eating. The author is not looking at the beginning and ending. Author is just looking at the action sort of unfolding, happening, ongoing, and is communicating that aspect, that imperfective aspect, that the action is ongoing. So these 2 tense forms, present and imperfect, are communicating this aspect. So what does this mean? It means that every time we see a present tense form, we have to find a way to communicate that the action is ongoing or in process or unfolding. For example, if we say, if we see Luo, Right now, you don't know that this is present, but let's say I tell you Luo is present. And you translate this as he had loosed. This would be wrong. Why? Because this is not communicating the action as ongoing or in process, unfolding. Imperfective aspect, you have to find a way to translate it as ongoing or in process or unfolding. Same thing with imperfect. So the first aspect, oh goodness, I lost the, never mind. I lost the 6 tense forms. But first aspect is imperfective aspect. Second aspect is perfective aspect. Only one tense form communicates that, which is aorist tense form out of the 6, where the author depicts the action as complete or as a whole. So the eating, now the author is looking at that action as a whole, as one thing, right? Including beginning and ending, everything done. For example, he ate. Yes, he ate. So see how when the author is not communicating he was eating or he while he was eating, nothing about that, right? The author is depicting the action as one whole unit. That is the perfective aspect. Perfective aspect. And only one tense form communicates that. Third and final aspect, stative aspect. Stative aspect, 2 tense forms, perfect and pluperfect. The author depicts a state of affairs or ongoing relevance resulting from a previous state of action. So let's say we say something like he had loosed. Now in the English, we don't really have this idea that there is a relevance resulting from this losing. But when you see these 2 tense forms in the Greek, perfect or pluperfect, they are communicating that there is a ongoing relevance. Something has happened, the losing took place, and there is a relevance to it. So this is a very, very important thing that we need to understand. So please take your time and just digest this. 3 aspects and 5 of the tense forms. So you can see the one missing in these tense forms is the future tense form. Now in the future tense form, again, this is hotly debated and talked about. But for now, we'll just say the future aspect. The future tense form is communicating a future action, whether it is unfolding or as a whole or all of that. It's for level 2. For now, we will just, whenever we see the future tense form, we will just translate it as in the future. He will lose. And so there is the issue of time. Okay, so please read this, reread this, and do your very best to understand what aspect is and what are the 3 aspects. Let me pause for just a second to see if there are any questions.
Brother, can you give an example for the stative aspect? Because how it is relevant, ongoing relevant and all.
Yeah. So in English, we don't really communicate that, right? When we say, for example, let's go back here. See, this is the perfect. These 2 tense forms are communicating the stative aspect. And see, all that they've done to translate it is Leluka is I have loosed. And Elelukan is I had loosed. when you read this English, you don't really see that there is an ongoing relevance, right? But what we are saying through the aspect is, we as translators now, or we as people who are learning the grammar now, need to realize that this perfect tense form is somehow communicating it. So even though in our English Bible we may just see I have loosed, and we know now that this is in the perfect tense form, in our mind we need to have the idea of something like I have loosed, and it has ongoing relevance, right? Meaning, so one way this can be ongoing relevance is that the losing is still going on. That for example, there's a donkey, right? The donkey is even now loosed. That could be an ongoing relevance. Many times we see the usage of salvation, verbs that talk about salvation being in the perfect. And in the English, when we just see that, we just see you have been saved, right? And in the English, it doesn't communicate that there is ongoing relevance. But now when we know that this is in the perfect tense form, we need to understand in our minds there is ongoing relevance. Now, what that ongoing relevance is, there's no hard and fast rule saying, I have loosed means that even now it's loose. No, not necessarily. What is that ongoing relevance? Context will tell us. So what we can do in the future, or maybe on Thursday, is take one or two usages of perfect verbs in the Greek, in some verses, and see in the context what is the ongoing relevance that is being communicated. For now, though, do you at least understand these three kinds of aspects? Is this clear enough?
Yeah. Yes.
Good, good. Anybody else, any questions?
Anna, is Jesus is coming soon also is one of these imperfective aspect where his coming is unfolded, or like
So that's a great question. So in the future tense form, so if you see some verb will say he will return. This is in the future tense form. Now, is this returning in the imperfective aspect where the action is ongoing or unfolding? Or is it action as a whole? Or is it ongoing relevance? The scholars are not able to agree on that here in the future tense form. So this is something that we just cannot very clearly pinpoint. All that we can say at this point is it's happening in the future time. He will return. But what we can also do, along with the perfect tense form, maybe on Thursdays, look at some future verbs in the Greek and see maybe in the context if there is something that will communicate it to us. That's also a great question. Any other questions, at least on the basic understanding of these aspects? Is it clear enough? Okay, so I'm going to assume the silence is positive. Now, if you don't understand this slide, it is going to be very, very, very difficult to progress. So please read this well. You can listen to the audio or the video again. And if you have any questions about this, please, let's address it on Thursday. Now, you don't have to get into all the nitty-gritties and the nuances of how do we translate this and those things, but you've got to at least understand the basic idea of these three tense forms. Basic idea, what's on the slide, that you have to, it needs to be well parsed in your mind. Okay, now we're going to see the first paradigm, like how we saw the paradigm for nouns, both singular and plural, and 4 cases. Right? This was our paradigm for the nouns. Now, what will be our paradigm for the verbs is going to be person here. First person, second person, third person. And then here we'll do number. Sorry. Here we'll do number, singular, plural. So first person singular will be I. First person plural will be we. Second person singular will be you. Second person plural will be you all. Third person singular will be he, she, it. Third person plural will be they. This will be our paradigm by which, firstly, we will learn a very important verb, which is Amy. Amy, the present tense form. And what is present tense form communicating? Imperfective aspect, meaning action is ongoing, unfolding, right? In process. Present tense form. Indicative mood, meaning the action is really happening from the viewpoint of the author, or certain, or asserted from the viewpoint of the author, the action is really happening. So we're going to look at the present tense form indicative mood of Amy, which is the to be verb. I am, right? To be. Let's look at the paradigm. Present indicative of Amy. Copulative verbs in English. Why do we say these are copulative verbs, Amy? Is because they help combine. They help combine. For example, we say, I am hungry, right? They help us combine, the action to the object. And the verb to be, which is this Amy, is very irregular in English. For example, again, this is first person, second person, third person, singular, plural. I am, I will be. Right? Oh, that's not, I'm sorry, this is not in person. This is just to show how the verb to be in English is very irregular. It changes form. Sometimes it is am, sometimes it is are, sometimes it is, right? Now this is the third person singular, is. In the future, will be, a new word is now added in the future. Was in the past, were in the first person plural, right? Very irregular. The verb to be is called copulative because it joins words together. As such, it does not take a direct object, but a predicate nominative. I think I mentioned this in one of our sessions. What's a predicate nominative? A predicate nominative is where the noun is in the nominative case. But even though it's in the nominative case, it's the object. And maybe right after we do this, I'll show the example from John 1. Usually the nominative case is the subject. The accusative case is the object. But when you see this copulative verb, I am, or the am verb, the to be verb, its direct object is in the nominative case. Its direct object is in the nominative case. Let me actually quickly show it in John 1. So this is the most famous, one of the most famous verses, no? So you see here, oops, so sorry. Pull this here. So see here, en arche, en ha logos, kai ho logos, en proston theon. Now, kai theos, en ha logos, right? You see here how ha logos, this is very clearly nominative, masculine, singular, ha logos. So this is the subject. But even theos here, it's in the nominative. Had it been in the accusative, it would have been theon. But and what is the to be verb? En here. En here, it's in the imperfect. En is the to be verb. Now, because there is the to be verb here, you're not seeing theos in the accusative as the object. Instead, you're seeing it in the nominative. And this nominative is called the predicate nominative. So therefore, ha logos becomes the subject. The word in the imperfect was the to be verb here. In was. So the word was. And this now, even though it's in the nominative, is the direct object, God. And the word was God, right? So that's what we are trying to communicate here. That these copulative verbs, to be verbs, where did that go? Yeah, here. The copulative verbs, to be verbs, do not take a direct object, but a predicate nominative. So anytime you see a nominative case along with the to be verb, and it's anarthrous, it doesn't have an article, it's usually the object, the predicate nominative. Like here, I am he. They are good. Okay, now finally, here is our paradigm for Amy. Present indicative, present tense form, which means imperfective aspect. Action is ongoing, unfolding, in progress. Indicative mood, the action is being asserted. It's really happening from the viewpoint of the author. Person, number. So the way we parse verbs will be, we would say present, active, indicative, first person, plural. This will be our pattern. For example, if I say, what is Esmen? You have to say it's present, active, indicative, first person, plural. That will be our pattern. So first we say, what's its tense form? Present tense form. Then we say, what is its voice? It's active. We should also add here active, present active indicative. So we say tense form followed by the voice, present active, and then the mood. What mood it is in. It's in the indicative mood. And then the person, first person, second person, third person, and then the number, singular or plural. That should be our pattern. So here's our paradigm for the to be verb. First person, singular, Amy, which would be translated, I am. So in that very famous 7 sayings of Christ in John, where he asserts himself as I am, this is what you see. You see ego, eimi, I am. So this is very important. We remember, eimi, I am. Esmen, we are. You are. Este, you all are. Second person plural. Estin, he, she, it is. Estin. Eisen, they are. Right? So eimi is communicating the to be verb. So if I say, please parse Eisen, you would say it is present active indicative third person plural, and its meaning is they are. So this is what you'll have to memorize. Just some notes here. These two are the most famous ones. You see these all over. And probably I would say Estin is more common than eimi, as far as I can remember. So Estin will be something that you will pretty much remember in your mind, because you'll see it so many times in scripture. Estin. And then eimi, probably you'll remember, because that's the main word for the paradigm. And anything else? Yeah. So apart from this, you should just memorize this paradigm like we did for the nouns. Yeah. So please memorize this. This will be part of your assignment for this week. And please also write beside it the translation. I am, we are, you all are, they are, you are, he, she, it is, right? Along with this, you'll have to write it as assignment. Now, finally, vocab for this week. I know you all have missed vocabulary last week so much, so let's add it to our list. Okay, first, and all of these are verbs. All of these are verbs. First verb, ago. I lead, I bring. Pedagogical. So pedagogical thing is something that a teacher is sort of leading you. Pedagogy, where the teacher leads the student. Ago, I lead. And you see this many, many times in scripture. Ago. Blepo. I see, look at. Blepo. I see, look at. Didasko. I teach. Didasko. I teach. Many times the disciples call Christ teacher, and then they use a form of this. Didaskale. Didasko. I teach. Egero. I raise up. Egero. I raise up. Krino. I judge, condemn. Krino. I judge, condemn. Do you notice that all these verbs are ending with omega? And this omega is actually telling us that it is first person singular. So all of these are in the first person singular, I. Now, whenever this ending changes, the person and number also will change. For example, if it was gomen, this would be we lead. The omen ending is telling us that it is first person plural. But we'll look at this one next week. For now, just notice this. Next. Meno, I remain, abide, dwell. Meno. John 15, if my words abide in you and you abide in me, you see a lot of these menos. John 15, meno. I remain, abide, dwell. Hupago, I go away, depart. I go away, depart. Hupago. Doulos, now we are back to nouns. We're going to mix up nouns and verbs. Doulos, ha, telling us it's masculine. Slave, doulos, slave. Thanatos, death. Thanatos, death. I thought we already memorized Thanatos, maybe not. Suke, feminine noun. Soul, life, living being. And we've been studying Philippians 2 these days. And we saw in Philippians 1 and 2, many times this mentioned, be of one soul, suke, soul, life. The English word psychology is derived from it, suke, psychology. Last few verbs. Hora, hour. Hora, hour. A, if, whether. A, if, whether. Now this is called a conditional particle. Conditional particle. If, whether. Maybe someone with a very keen eye would have noticed this A in the Amy paradigm. Did you see it?
Yeah.
Here. Somebody was saying something.
Yeah, the second person singular, no? This A.
Yes, yes. See here. Oh, just a second. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Let me just send a very quick note to just a second. Okay. Yes, so we saw this in the second person singular here, right? Now, what is the difference between this and if, whether? Is just that circumflex. See, in the if, whether, there's no circumflex, right? You put a circumflex on top of this, and this becomes you are, right? Remove the circumflex, and it's a totally different word. It's a conditional particle, if, whether. So this is one of those rare instances where accent is making a difference in the meaning.
Yeah,
Okay, very rare.
Yeah, but you said no, it is having no impact on translation or meaning. Accent usually don't impact on meaning and translation, no?
Yes.
But here it is making a difference if whether.
It is. That's why we said usually it doesn't make a difference. Right? And there's another instance with tis, where because of the accent, it is either a question interrogative pronoun or it is a pronoun. Or it is a personal, not a personal pronoun. It's an indefinite pronoun. So there are few words like this where accent makes a difference. And if you remember, even at that time, I said, when we come to those words, I will point out. And this is one such word where having the circumflex would change it to a to be noun, you are. Now
One more
another,
thing.
yeah.
You said that first person singular in all the words ends with omega. Here in the table Amy, we don't have the omega.
Correct. So those omega endings are for other verbs which are not copulative verbs. This is not a copulative verb. This is a general verb. So non-copulative verbs have different endings. And how do these end? We will see next week. So where were we? We saw here, and we just made a note of that circumflex nuance. There's another word also for if whether, which is ite. Both I and ite communicate if whether, conditional particle. Kathos, just as, even as. So we see this in Ephesians 1. God has chosen you before the foundation of the world, just as. It comes many verses later. Kathos, just as. In the same way. Hos, again, similar as, like. Hos. Hora is a little bit similar. Hos, hora. And that's it. All right, so